chat with Ninth Biennial artists. So this is our 5th in the series of chats that we're doing while we have the South Dakota Governor's 9th Biennial Art Exhibition on display at the South Dakota Art Museum. That biennial has been organized since 2003, and it's an exhibition open to all artists living and working currently in the state of South Dakota. This is always a really rich mixture of different kinds of artistic practices in the state. And this is the first time we've done these virtual cocktail hour chats with the show. It really was a replacement for the opening reception we usually have for the exhibition. So it's a juried show. Anybody in the state can participate. 30 out of the 66 artists who ended up having work selected for the show are doing the chats with us. So we're super excited. It's nearly half of all the artists in the show we get to hear from, which was a really rare opportunity. We've never heard from so many artists directly with exhibitions, so it's been fun for us. And this is obviously the 5th one. It'll run through June 8th will be our last one. The week before we have it on a Thursday instead of a Tuesday. All the rest are Tuesdays. So please come back. These are all recorded and they're archived online for us too. So there'll be really good resources to check out going into the future. So every week I've been, I kind of took the list of artists who are interested and grouped them based around some sort of common thread. This one I think was my loosest common thread. Most of the others were pretty much decisions I made, but Diana Behl, Amanda Boerger was actually a student of Diana Behl's, and I also thought that Diana Behl and Liz Heeren were a good fit together. So Diana Behl's kind of the intersection of why this group came together. But they've had some good conversations lately through an email thread about this chat, about the way that the everyday works into their practices. And I can see that in all of their practices. So that might be maybe a more accurate description of the common thread between their works. But they're also just really kind of young female contemporary artists in the southeast corner of the state here. And so I'm excited to hear from all 3 of them. So with that, I'll keep it pretty short. We're going to hear from Liz and then Amanda and then Diana. And if everybody could kind of save up questions, if you've got them, put them in the chat now. We'll have the folks visiting and in attendance, they can throw out some questions at the end so that we don't spend too much time with any one artist. But feel free to put them in the chat now because we'll pull those up and ask them later. So with that, we will go ahead and pass it over to Liz. Excited to hear from you. Thanks for coming, Liz.
Yeah, thank you. Talking to the artists, we all decided to pick a broad topic and that applies to our work, but may intersect with one another's work. And for me, I suggested that I address content and perspective. And you called me a young artist. Thank you, Jodi. But I don't always feel that way, having been practicing in South Dakota for about 20 years now. And in my mind, I see the way I work as it's the only time you can actually gain perspective is when you've had 20 years to really think about how your work has changed and who you are as an artist, what the content of your work has done over time or shifted or become. And so I wanted to address that. And I kind of like, there were some major things that I thought about as I was kind of putting this together, and I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint so we can look at some work while we're talking about it. But there's a lot of things that change your perspective as an artist. There was the young artist, Liz. I sought a lot of control in my work. And by that, I mean, I was, had a lot of narrative, and I would really seek to illustrate a very specific idea. And I wanted it to be very clear. I wanted people to understand and recognize it and to communicate with me about it, or to see the evolution of a story or a narrative coming through the work. I used a lot of symbolism through kind of real references to animals and humans. And a lot of it was rooted in biology, which I was just sharing with the rest of the group was actually my first declared major at St. Olaf College. In fact, I was pre-med, and that's kind of what you do when you go to school and you feel like, well, if I'm going to make the most out of my expensive education, I better end up, like in the medical field. But I realized that I was very different from my peers who were becoming doctors, and I was maybe not very, I wasn't in sync with them in a lot of ways. I liked open-ended questions. I really liked unsolvable science, or science that didn't have, that was very theoretical. So it put me in, I would have been best suited for research, but then I picked up an art major, and that was that. You know, I was well on my way and finished both of them out. But my point is that biology has really informed my work for a very long period of time. And so now I'm kind of finding that I reflect on that now, like where my references to science or life were, where they are now, and how much control I try to elicit over my own work, over the viewing of my work, which has changed incredibly. Some of that due, I think, to just time, to familiarity with your materials, to the point where you exhaust the familiarity with your materials and you feel so familiar with your materials that you seek the unfamiliar again. And you can't unlearn, so you find new ways to reverse your process. And so I'm going to share with you
a series of chats that we're doing where we're reviewing of my work.
Oh, so what I was going to share with you is just like sometimes when I feel like I've pulled away from typical process and reversed my process so that I can think differently and challenge myself differently. Birth and having a child, and then also death, change you, and your perspective on life and the cycle of life, I think, has really changed me as a more adult and contemplative artist. And then definitely most recently, control of process and letting go of some of that. So I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint real quick here and put it into, there we go. Can everybody see that okay? All right. That's a very simple PowerPoint starter there. That's my style, I guess. So in addressing content, this is from 2009. It was a series I did in a show with Diana called Anthologies in Flux with Diana Behl and Cisa Cooper. And specifically, we were all talking about identity and our sense of place. And I was looking at identifying with biological creatures and using them as a way to explore, well, the exploration of natural zones that are interrupted by unnatural things. And in all of this series, there's an interruption. A lot of times it's a man-made form, a pipe or a conduit, a flag, or something very synthetic. Sometimes it's a remnant, but amidst the animal and the soil, the chaos and the dirt and the things that are natural that we don't try to control, there's usually like ultimately a very synthetic thing that disturbs that kind of wonderful, you know, like lack of predictability that we find in nature. That was part of just me examining human relationships with nature, animal relationships with humans, animal relationships with nature, and me unpackaging all of that as I went through it. That kind of led to a whole series on construction zones. And I got really kind of curious about how dirt, rock, and earth, atmosphere, and natural things that we encounter just in the soil or just in the land itself are upheaved and kind of like made evident, like what's under the ground made so evident to us, these raw materials, but then these like calling cards of humans that rest on top of it, flags, partitions, pipes, and lots of like really ultimately eye-catching and very synthetic colors that disrupt all of that. And that became another really interesting study of human presence in natural zones. And that led to a number of works where I was still carrying some of that synthetic quality and those earth quality elements with color references. But I began to, here's where process really starts to change for me. Instead of building up with an idea, and some of it abstract and some of it changing right in front of my eyes and not always concrete and unfolding, you know, as I worked, I began to take demonstration drawings I was doing and drawing one with my students, where I would draw them as a means to discuss like how you draw the proportions of the figure. And then I would mount it onto a cradled board and dismember it. I would like conceal, reveal, push back, pull forward. And it was a total reversal of process. And that's what I needed at the time, a change in how I worked so that my brain was more challenged and that I could rethink the way I process information about painting. And it's another examination of human, sometimes human and tech in this series, but human in nature and human and their relationship with their environment. And a lot of kind of residual imagery kind of took place. You can see the double legs in this one, an almost like offset or lack of registration that happens in a lot of these where I'm addressing a lack of clarity. But this was so hard for me. The first couple ones I did were just like puzzling and perplexing. I was starting with a very finished thing and then pushing something else into it. Instead of starting from blank, I was starting from something fully finished. And that was super challenging for me. I, from there, began to find curiosity in what I could do that would ultimately super duper change my process. And I have on the screen now my first reversible landscape that I considered a success. And there were a lot of lack of, you know, unsuccessful, completely lacking success images, but they started off as space references. And my child kind of influenced me. Man, have we watched a lot of how the universe works. And he's so into physics and astrophysics. And I see his brain grasping things in ways that my brain can't. And it was that way of thinking that I wanted to delve into. He could take concrete theory, scientific theoretical perspective, and use it in the way it is discussed and understood by scientists, and then very quickly reverse it into something fictitious and that applies to his own imagination, his own mind. And I wanted to explore that state of mind, movement back, forth between understanding things and looking at them in one direction and then reversing it on yourself and completely understanding it in a totally different orientation. So these, although highly abstracted, have enough references to land, lakes, skies, horizons, mountains, I don't know, celestial forms, that in both directions you can make sense of what's happening in it. And I found that, and I still do, really interesting. And so I started to play with where that could go and how far I could push that, and what needed to be present, what didn't need to be present, and playing as well with like the fact that I didn't know the destination point for all of these paintings, which is uncomfortable and lovely at the same time. So there's a lot of play. There's a lot of, you know, trying to satisfy myself. And these don't look like they are trying to do anything probably, but I felt like I needed to reach a certain level of satisfaction with each of these pieces to kind of say, yes, I've come to where I wanted to go with this. And I feel that I reached this point where we can understand it logically from both perspectives. That to me is a really interesting idea, that you can feel satisfaction, not just aesthetic, but in realities, like the reality of that abstract landscape and the reality of it in the complete reverse. And that's a separate thing from like the satisfaction you get when you are working abstractly and you say, I've come to a point where I'm satisfied with the visual nature of this thing. This is a different level of me working through all of that, because it also has to fulfill this other thing, this like touch point of reality. Not very real, but still partly real. So that's been really fun for me. Now this one, I don't know where that went, but it's like the natural point of departure. Sometimes when you're working on a body of work and you feel like you've understood or even almost developed a method, you usually start to shift. And this is kind of a painting where I feel like a shift is occurring, and it's headed way more towards the abstract realm. But there's still something really deeply satisfying. And I'm like embracing the fact that it took all of that energy through the Reversible Landscape series to get me to a more sophisticated place in non-objective. And I couldn't have arrived there without having gone through and broken down the process of conveying abstraction and reality simultaneously and reversing it until I got to this point. There's some really loud jets flying over my studio. That's just adding to the urban element of this whole thing. And this is my very most recent one. This one goes back to being landscape landform-ish. I think there's also kind of like, I felt like when I finished this that I had executed a poster, a reversible poster for like the Winter Olympics in Sweden or something. But there was something about it that felt more kind of commercial than the other ones. And I was like, what happened? And I like this piece, or I wouldn't have stopped here. But I also feel like I'm reaching a point of dissatisfaction, satisfied with this, but also kind of wanting my brain to go back maybe more towards that. And likewise, I've also started painting the figure again. So like that movement, that oscillation between both of those is something that I'm really interested in. So that's my practice in a nutshell. What I'm trying to do is talk about the change of practice that accompanies the change of perspective that happens when you're a practicing artist over a kind of longer period of time.
Thank you. That was great. I really liked tracing that. I mean, I'm really familiar with your work, but to see it laid out like that and that progression, you know, in 2017, I did the show Between Order and Chaos about abstraction, and that question of order or control and chaos and the intuition in your practice is something I think everybody working in the realm of abstraction has to grapple with that. And it's not something you decide once, obviously, you know, that balance or how much one plays in or the other is something that it's, you know, all artists are responsive to their own lives in that sense. So it was great to see it lined out like that for us in your practice. So
Thanks.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we will hear from Amanda next. Oh, but we've got Diana. There we go.
All right, let me see. I figured this out once. So let me see if I can figure it out again. Yay.
Yep. There we go.
Yay. Okay, cool. Okay, so hi, I'm Amanda. And today my topic is talking about my life, how I look at things, and then how that translates into my art making. So just really quickly about me for anyone who doesn't know, I was a double major at SDSU. So I studied French studies and studio art. I also had certificates in modern and contemporary art history, as well as printmaking. So I am a student of Diana Behl, and I saw Peter joined too, so also a student of Peter. Presently, I work at the Boys and Girls Club, so I teach art after school, but I also paint a lot. So today we're talking about painting. So slide number 1, this is coping mechanism, and this is the piece I have at the Biennial right now. So you can see just for scale that it is a large piece, my first large piece. And really, I don't have like, my evolution is a little smaller than Liz's. I think I'm like just getting started to making work that I actually like right now. So this is good. Some themes that are constant in my work are, I guess I consider myself a pop artist. So I'm constantly recording scenes and postures and products and behaviors that I think are relevant to popular culture today. So in this painting, coping mechanism number 1, we're looking at my friend Dylan, and he is binging on his phone after a day of work. So yeah, the coping mechanism factor is really just coping after work. So the second of this series is my mom. So she works her butt off. She's an attorney. She lives in Los Angeles. And I remember on this day, I photographed her and she sighed. She often sighs when she's really tired, and she's like, I want a hamburger. So this painting, you see my mom purchasing a coffee and a hamburger. The next couple slides are kind of coping mechanisms that are a little more personal. I guess I just thought of cuter titles, so they're not titled coping mechanism like the other ones. But there's a doing okay piece. So again, it's a pretty like, I think a pretty like outright pop art piece. And it's very tied to 2020. One day I had gotten takeout, which a lot of us did more often during 2020. And when I plopped it on my table, I kind of laughed and I thought, wow, the way this smiley face is stretched over these styrofoam boxes, it kind of looks more like a, I'm doing okay face, which I thought was relevant to kind of how I was living my life in 2020. Like everyone would ask me, you know, oh, hi, how you doing? And I was like, I'm okay. So just another reference to contemporary and popular culture. Another recent piece, this is, I just call it Pop Life, but it could be a coping mechanism in the coping mechanism series. Pop Life, I like these popular scenes, like I said. So something I do before I go to work every day to work with the kids, after painting and shipping things and sending emails all morning, is sometimes I will go and buy like a ultra large water or a Coke before I go to work, and it just makes me feel more confident about the work I'm about to do. All right, and then this is the first of a series that I'm about to do, but this will soon be a show at the Pavilion. I think it's about a year out, but I'm working on this now. So I'm working on these long pieces that are going to be stacked. So I'm going to show objects on shelves and stack them like the shelves themselves. And again, it's just making a nod to the everyday and these things we do. But I don't know, there's little happy moments, even though, I don't know, you go through your daily life and maybe it's not all glamorous, but there are these happy moments. I don't know why I've always been drawn to soap. I think it looks like little like gems, the way it kind of glows in these plastic bottles. So yes, that's why I did that. This is a piece I made really recently. This is the most recent of all the pieces I'm showing you, and a piece that I'm really excited about. What I really like about this piece is you get a couple of things. One, it was shot with my new iPhone 12, and it has this 0.5 lens, which does this awesome perspective thing where the perspective I felt like was really dramatic. And then what I'm trying to show in this painting is two things. I'm showing the beauty of nature, the beauty of life. We look out the window, we see the gorgeous clouds, we see the gorgeous plains, just like gorgeous South Dakota. But then we're also reminded of these duties and these chores and these stressors that are tied to, you know, living our lives and being a part of society. So maybe that's the MPH. You're looking, I'm traveling at 80 hours a mile on this, or, you know, the check engine light, or the mobile sticker, which is reminding you to get your oil change. So tying into popular culture in that way. All right, and then I have this series. This is growing, and it's kind of pop in two ways. So one, this has been selling really well. Every time I make one, it's gone before I know it. So just in the mere fact that it's been so commodified, these pieces have been so commodified and on their own is kind of like a pop aspect to me. It's also very pop in the colors I chose. But there's another element here to me. When people ask, oh, so you like really like bananas, or like, what's this about? It's a couple things. I guess I was thinking about expiration dates and how, you know, food on shelves has an expiration date. And I was thinking about making a parallel to expiration dates and human bodies. So really, this piece is about life cycle. So that's why I've shown the 4 parts of the banana here. So if you look at top left, we have this banana, you know, it's like about to be banana bread. Top right, we've got, I don't know, banana in its middle age. Bottom left, we've got a banana that's kind of like perfect. And then, but it's not what it was, you know, when it was the green banana. So that's what that's about. And then I did include a couple pieces in this slideshow too, to just show you work that I was on just like a year ago. So back in 2019, these work kind of show you how I'm a bit more interested in behavior and psychology. So these are both going to be collages. In this pleasure center piece, I was doing a couple things at the time. I was flipping through vintage magazines, and it was so interesting because if you flip through, you know, 10 vintage magazines and you're looking for imagery for collage, how you see these repeated antiquated advertisements. I remember like laxatives was one that was like, what? And I was also reading psychology textbooks that my newly graduated friend had given to me at the time. So I had this idea. I wanted to portray what one of those, you know, like a rat experiment in a psych lab would look like with humans instead. So, you know, they've got those experiments where a rat's in a maze and has to do all these tasks. And, you know, there's peanut butter on the other end, and they draw these like parallels between psychology and, you know, the rat's performance. So in this piece, I'm thinking about humans. So I put, instead of peanut butter, I put money in the middle. And with the money, the person's going around, they're like furnishing their home, they're buying things to eat, they're buying things to drink. But they always come back to that source, which is, you know, I need more money to maintain my lifestyle. So really, it's rooted in the whole pop art thing as well. All right. And then from that same year, I have Dysfunctional Dollhouse. So it's really similar. There's all of these fractured planes, like a house where all the rooms are just jumbled together. And I guess I was thinking about a homemaker and how they're trying to make something really happy, and they're informed by, you know, all of those antiquated advertisements, which I had seen in those vintage magazines. And in that way, it's dysfunctional. You know, there's too much stuff, there's too much abundance, there's too much bright, and it's just not sustainable. And it keeps you on a track for wanting more and consuming more. And then lastly, these are some upcoming ideas I have. All of the paintings that I showed you previously, they are the source of me running around taking weird photos all the time. So yeah, my iPhone, oh my gosh, my phone is full. But here are some ideas I have. So you can see I like perspective, I like shadow, I like an eerie, I like when things are eerie. I like reflection, and I like that consumer aspect as well. So yeah, I think I breezed through that, but that's me.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks.
You know, it looks like you kind of have two veins where you're, you know, you've got the more naturalistic pop art where it's a scene, and it seems like the ones where you're breaking up space is very different. It comes from more of a, you have the concept kind of already developed. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like when you make that decision, I'm going to handle this strictly as, here I have this photograph, I like it, it's good, we're going to do this kind of painting. Do those
Exactly.
generate from different places, different internal considerations and discussions for you? Do you work on them parallel, or did you get into like a collage series where you're breaking up space in relationship to ideas and then moved over to the kind of more pop art, realist, naturalist kind of pieces?
You are right, and I love this question. So yeah, I guess they do come up about really differently. So I mean, I have these little like almost like keywords that pop up in my head. Like one of the ones I'm chewing on right now is I think about the word or the term state of emergency. And so right now, when I have an opportunity, I flip through magazines and I'm thinking about state of emergency. I'm thinking about fire and whatever else could go with that. Whereas, as you noticed, the more realistic renderings are just me walking around through life, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's interesting to me, and I snap it and I paint it. I will say the easier one of the two is the painting, just grabbing a photo and going for it. The collage itself is chaotic, at least my approach to it is. So when I'm gathering images, I amass these piles, and then, it goes over the course of days, weeks, and months, and me going back through this pile of like messy images. So maybe I think that's where the planes come in. You notice that I section off the spaces. It's
Right.
me trying to make sense of
Organize it.
this chaos I built. Yeah.
Sounds
Yeah.
good. Yeah, they're very different inspirational processes for you than with those two differences in the types of work, right? Yeah.
Totally.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and we'll hear from Diana Behl next, and then we will open it up to any other questions. So feel free to throw things out in the chat at any point. And also when Diana wraps up, feel free to throw them out too if you want to unmute yourself. So thank you, and let's hear from Diana.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you, everyone at the Art Museum and Jodi for the opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So I thought what I would do today is share some information about my process that is not visible. And I'm going to focus on the piece that is in the exhibit, and also an upcoming project that is going to be shown in Sioux Falls next month. My work considers the space between direct and indirect means of image making, using the everyday as a structure for inquiry. And this phrase, everyday is actually a portfolio that was, what show was it, Jodi? It wasn't Heart to Heart. I think it was Women at Work. It was a series of 5 etchings. And for me, the everyday is a philosophical approach to living, making, and teaching. I acknowledge that all parts of how I live and work are interconnected and impact each other. A core approach within my life and my art practice is finding connections between modes of working and thinking. And I don't know how many of you have seen this book. It's called The Everyday. A few years ago, I came across this phrase by contemporary artist Alan Ruppersberg, use everything. And actually, I'm glad that Peter Reichhardt is here, because Peter had a show a few years ago at the Washington Pavilion. The exhibit was named Use Everything. And I really love this to further explain the importance of the everyday, and really just thinking about how you can weave your lived experiences into your art practice and vice versa. And I'm also very interested in how work becomes a document of that lived experience. It becomes a document of your decisions, of erasures. And another really important part of how I have approached my work in the last few years is poet Bernadette Mayer. And a friend of mine whose husband is a creative fiction writer introduced me to Bernadette Mayer. Here's another book. I don't know if you can see the book cover. This is Works and Days. She's this beautiful writing, and I'm really attracted and interested in her writing and the way that she captures her own lived experiences through her writing, but I'm really also interested in her writing prompts. And my friend who introduced me to her and we actually assigned each other these prompts, and we're working on a collaborative project. And my prompt is this one. I'm gonna move all the faces so I can read it to you. A shocking experiment. Rip pages out of books at random. I guess you could Xerox them and study them as if they were a collection of poetic literary material. Use this method on your old high school or college notebooks. If possible, then create an epistemological work based on the randomly chosen notebook pages. So my randomly selected page is from a transistor radio manual. I'm not really sure how this manual ended up in my studio. I'm pretty sure that I purchased it from a secondhand store. Someone gave it to me, and I was doing a lot of collage at the time, and somehow this scrap ended up on my studio wall, and I decided that this was going to be my randomly selected work. And so what I started doing is I started extracting and combining snippets of text from this piece of paper to guide and sort of transmit a new narrative for myself. I was considering the titles and really thinking about how can I create personal meaning. And I'm really interested in this writing prompt. In similar to some of the things that Liz and Amanda brought up, is you never know where you're going to end up. And that's one of the most exciting parts of being an artist, and giving yourself assignments and sort of giving yourself structures for how you approach or interpret or how you execute. And so I've listed some of the titles and this body of work, and I'm not going to show you, I'm not going to focus on showing you a broad range of work during our conversation today, but I was really thinking about this phrase, and when A is B, and I interpreted that phrase to mean things are not always as they seem, and there's a lot of questions. Well, there's one question in this list, is 100 from B, and so I guess maybe for the audience, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but this really was a guide for me for how I was interpreting this new body of work. And so this is the piece that is in the Biennial. It incorporates transfer drawing and relief processes, lino cut, and laser engraved woodblock. It's on a Japanese paper called Kitakata. And the title that was assigned to this piece is in figure E, sort of like a diagram. And so these relief prints are pretty new to me. I was working on etchings for a really long time and I got so burned out. Etching can be extremely technical. It can be very tiresome. Even though I've spent 2 decades working with etching, you're still always learning. I think that's one of the reasons I love it, but I needed a shift. And so I'm working almost primarily in the relief process now. And my relief images, they are derived from these Sharpie marker drawings. And these drawings are automatic drawings. They're intuitive drawings. I think the batch on your right, I think I drew them while I was on the phone with someone. So what I'm doing with these little doodles, I scan them in, I bring them into Illustrator, I turn them into vector images, and then I can enlarge and distort them. And I print them out and I make compositions of them, and then I carve them. So I'm hand carving them. This is a block of linoleum that has been stained with acrylic paint. And so these drawings, you can see plant references. I love gardening. I've started becoming obsessed with plants. A lot of these drawings are loosely based off of plants and organic matter. And then this is an example of laser engraved. So using newer technologies so these came from Sharpie marker drawings, and I just love how precise and how crisp this line has become. And then here's that image again. And so you can see that block that I just showed you printed in different colors. So with this body of work, I'm printing a lot of blocks. I'm using translucent inks and layering until the image feels right, until it has this sense of balance or imbalance or a sense of depth that feels just right. I receive a question a lot. How do you know when your piece is finished? And it's this similar the satisfaction that Liz was talking about, right? That it's a visual satisfaction. There's a harmony or a disharmony, but also it seems like a question has been answered, or maybe you're in a place where it's okay for questions to continue to arise. And then some of you may be familiar with some of these collage pieces through printmaking and through doing a lot of printing. I end up with a lot of raw material to use for my collages. So all of this is all hand printed. There's some digital printing, hand painted elements. So this project, it's in its final stages of completion. It is actually going to be shown in the Going Metro exhibit that opens next month at the Washington Pavilion. So this is a project that I started in 2015. And it actually just started out as I made 2 small etchings, and I titled them Map A and Map B. And the next summer, I made a 3rd small etching and named it Map C. And eventually, I decided I should make an entire alphabet of these tiny etchings. I had seen an exhibit at the Fabric Museum in Philadelphia by artist Richard Tuttle. It was expansive. The exhibit, it spanned multiple floors, multiple venues. It was amazing. And he made these projects out of tiny little pieces, etchings, collage, hand painted things. And I connected with this work in a really deep way. And so that really impacted my decision to create 26 tiny etchings. And this project, it started by unearthing a box of drawings that I had made, I think in 2007. So I don't know, they were 12 or 13-year-old drawings. And I love that. I love finding things in your studio that you haven't looked at in years and years, and having this new perspective and new knowledge, and maybe a more objective way of observing. And that's what influenced this series. And so I haven't included the entire alphabet here to share with you. You can take a look at my website to see the full project, or also take a look at the pavilion next month. So it's important to note the images are not literal representations of each letter. Rather, the letter is a form of organization. It's a kind of index for me. It's a way to help me keep track of them. And the other thing to note is that I'm not thinking of the map, that it's not literal. It's not a navigational tool as we know how to recognize and interpret a map. Rather, a map is a verb in this context. Its serial format provides a structure for viewing and interpreting the pace of looking as a viewer, and mapping decisions made in color and composition throughout the duration of its creation. So 6 years. I worked on a few of these at a time in the summer, and I'm not going to be able, I need some time to reflect on this project, but I do think that there's going to be a visible transformation from map A, which is on the left here, to map Z. And some of these images, so these are line etchings. Some of them incorporate some gouache drawing. I can't remember. It's hard for me to recognize. I think this is map D and map G. J and K. I think it's really important to view these in person, like all works of art, but there is an embossment that the edges of these plates are highly polished.
And are a lot of these drawn again from doodles?
Yeah.
Are you far removed from a source? Are you sketching from things in life? Or again, is this very kind of intuitive and almost stream of consciousness?
Yeah, most of these are all from automatic intuitive drawings. And they really were influenced by this box of drawings that I made many years ago. And all of those were very intuitive. The drawings and the imagery from this series, it really doesn't reference anything from reality, though you may interpret them, you may see the structure, you may see the looseness. You may interpret this as sort of a garden cage, but it doesn't have that direct reference. So this red one is Z. That's the end.
And these are quite small.
Yeah, they are small.
It's always hard to tell through, virtual, but.
Yeah, I was just looking around to see if I had one in my studio, but I don't. The paper size is 12 by 10 inches, so the plates vary in size. And this is something new that I'm working on. I think that project, it was the biggest project, the longest project I've ever worked on. And even though they're tiny drawings, I hope that the impact is big. I don't know, we'll see when they're all displayed together. but this is the next thing that I'm working on, and it's new. It's very new, so I can't tell you a whole lot, but it's another project that will involve a series, a set number, and small plates and drawings.
You know, I do know your alphabet series a little bit, and I think you had questions about how to display it. Have you settled on that yet?
Yeah, I think that I want to see them in a line, one single line,
Sure.
because I think a lot about pace. So it was my pace in making them. It's very slow, very methodical. I redid some of them. They didn't etch the way I wanted to, and so I redid them, and I tried as much as I could to work in alphabetical order. So I didn't work on, you know, I didn't skip ahead, and I redid some of them. So I think this project is a lot about pace and the recording of pace for me as the maker, but hopefully the viewer also has a sense of they are able to slow down and recognize their own pace as they're viewing them. And so I think that line is really important. Oh, I see a note from Peter. He took his title from Ruppersberg. Use everything.
It's the greatest compliment, right? Theft. Okay, thank you. Well, I think at the end it is open to comments, questions, feedback between the artists. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat, or really could even unmute yourself and ask it at this point. I want to thank all three artists for sharing with us. This has been so good to hear from so many folks, and these three together has been great. I do see one question up in the chat for Liz, and Lynette is wondering how long did you work on each of those abstract reversals that you were sharing?
I tend to work on several at the same time. So that slows the pace of development of any one thing. But for me to remain kind of productive, it's best for me to have like 4 or 5 things going at the same time. So I'll abandon something for a while, especially if I'm stuck, and I'll find a new solution by doing something somewhere else, and that helps me to resolve something. So time is always like, it's like a collection that's all being kind of worked on simultaneously. In the last year, production's pretty slow, and I was the ones that's in the biennial. I was pretty focused on it, but it took me. And here's another thing about being an instructor, and and a mom and running a gallery. I have started to say it's okay for me to work with my students around. Privacy's gone in my practice. It's like totally gone. There's no time by myself. And that's just part of like where I'm at in my life right now. So I make work in the same way that I did when I was in grad school, which is like I was working full-time in grad school full-time, and I just have to stop what I was doing at work, go to grad school, get in the creative zone, stop, go back to work. And so like I just have to find pockets of productivity, and a lot of times it's right in the middle of class. So like I said, if I got like probably 3 paintings done this semester, and I was proud of myself for that.
Yeah, I wonder if that also has something to do with the kind of move away from, control being so important, because it does control. You get I think the older you get and the more spheres of activity you have like that, the harder it is to so explicitly control so many things.
Right.
This is Lynette again, and I have a question for Diana. For the piece that you have in the governor's show, Did you have an idea of what that was going to look like when you started out, or did this just totally evolve over time?
That's a great question. Thanks, Lynette. I did not have an idea. I don't plan the compositions out, especially for these relief prints. I'm working very intuitively. I think that's a reason, one of the reasons why it's such a slow process. It's a response process. So I'll start with a layer and then I carve, I carve it. There are times where I'll have multiple blocks carved or prepared, but I print one layer and then I usually wait a week or 2 weeks for that layer to dry, and then I'll print some more. And then I'm waiting another week or two and printing some more and so forth. And so where I'm at right now, the semester just ended and I will resume work in the print studio that I haven't looked at pieces for 6 months. So I forget what they look like. I forget what I have. And so I'm really interested in the sort of accumulation and how you change, how your decisions change over time, and how the work is a document of all of those decisions. So it's really just responding. I don't work that way with every process, but for the relief prints, it's a lot of not knowing. It's a lot of just trust the process, trust yourself. And the way that I work, if things don't work out, so there's this piece behind me, it's not working, I'm gonna cut it up. It's gonna turn into something else. And so I never think of, nothing is wasted. There's no failure. It's just keep going. You respond and make decisions based on the action that happened before. Thank you.
I just want to add to that because I think that, I mean, that's such like, I think most artists have kind of iterative processes like that. And there are all these little decisions. And then the big decision near the end, is this a success or not? And I mean, I've got a studio background. So my process as a curator is so rooted in that. And so when I talk to people about museums, we're so used to walking in and you see these discrete objects on the wall. They're clearly like, here are the successes on the wall. They've been deemed finished. But the museum is like an artist's process, in that it's this living organism, you know, and again, like going back to anthologies and flux, there's continual input coming in, and you kind of choose these points of resolution. And maybe that's, this point is here where there's an artwork's arrived or an exhibition's arrived. But what's really exciting about art is process, and all of those little things that come up or fade away, or the changes that happen over time. You know, which is really why I titled the show of that abstract works from the collection past present, after a work by Diana Behl, because I think there are such parallels with process that is not very visible. You know, we talk about it here, so now it's visible for non-artist audiences, but there's such an interesting parallel and then disconnect from what the, you know, the public experiences of our work that we do. So really good stuff to talk about, because I don't think it gets out there into the public dialogue about art that often, really. So there's one great question from Peter Reichart for Liz. And he's asking, do you feel like you're playing a game of chess against yourself when you're working on your reversible paintings? So you're just turning it over and seeing who's gonna what's the next move, who's gonna win this battle, who's gonna come out a stalemate in the end?
Kind of, yeah. And kind of like, I can't even explain it, because you're right, like you have to find satisfaction for this, like this Liz and this other Liz in the other direction or something like that. But it is a kind of bizarre place to be, and it's like a state of mind. Like I really do think, and I think Jodi, you described to me that I was trying to articulate what I was trying to do. And you know, it's hard to even, it's easier to get to the path where you kind of through practice know what you're doing. Sometimes it's harder for me to articulate that. And you were in my studio one time and you said, well, it's like you're like trying to arrive at a state of mind, because I was describing my son's state of mind. I was like, yes. So yeah, I do kind of feel like I'm playing chess against myself in some way, but the challenge is the fun part, right? It's like the resolution and the difficulty of that is the only thing that makes it really that satisfying right now, besides the aesthetic outcome of all of it. It's that other like puzzle, difficult element. So yeah, good question, and a really good way to like articulate. I'm going to borrow that from Peter now and put that in my back pocket as a way to explain my work.
And don't we all kind of do that for that feel good aha moment where you know, you hit that and you're like, that's it right there. Like, I think artists kind of crave that, the challenge and the dialogue and the conflict that then in the end it's like, bah, it's like this glowing, vibrating result in the end. Good stuff. That's for sure. Well, I don't see any more questions coming through the chat or people unmuting themselves. So thank you three for coming and sharing with us. And thanks for everybody tuning in. Hopefully we'll see a lot of you next week on Tuesday, May 25th for our next chat. So thanks so much and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.